It was well past visiting hours when Emily Carter glanced at the clock above the nurse's station. 11:47 p.m. The ward was quiet, too quiet. Most nurses had already gone home, the day shift had long ended, and night duty had settled into its usual rhythm of dim lights, distant beeps, and the occasional soft shuffle of slippers against tile. She had finished her paperwork, turned in her reports, and should have been walking out the door. But a faint, muffled sound, half sigh, half sob, drifted from room 312. Emily paused, her bag still slung over her shoulder. It was Mr. Whitmore's room. The man had been admitted 3 days ago for observation after a mild stroke. 72 years old, silver hair perfectly combed, posture still somehow regal despite the hospital gown. He had barely spoken to anyone, answering questions politely but briefly, as though conversation was a luxury he no longer had the strength for. But now, alone in the dark, he was crying. She pushed the door open slowly, her shoes whispering against the floor. "Mr. Whitmore? Are you all right?" He didn't turn to look at her. His gaze was fixed on the night sky outside the narrow hospital window, the city lights twinkling far away. "I'm fine, nurse. You should go home." His voice was low, a little hoarse. "I don't think you're fine," she said gently, stepping closer. "And my name's Emily." He gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh, wiping his eyes quickly. "You don't need to stay. It's been a long time since anyone's asked how I'm doing." She set her bag down on the chair, pulling it closer to his bedside. "Then maybe tonight's the night someone listens." And so, they talked. At first, he gave short answers, yes, no, fine. But Emily was patient, letting silences stretch without pressure. Slowly, words began to spill out. His wife, Margaret, had passed away 7 years earlier after a battle with cancer. They had been married for 49 years. She was his anchor, his best friend, his reason for waking up every morning. Since her death, the days had blurred into one another. He had no children, no close family left, only an empty mansion and a calendar filled with business meetings that no longer mattered. Emily didn't offer clichés. She didn't say, "It'll get better," or "Time heals." Instead, she shared how she'd lost her mother young, how the grief had felt like a constant shadow she learned to walk alongside rather than escape. Something in her honesty seemed to break through his reserve. They sat like that for nearly 2 hours, her listening, him speaking in fits and starts, sometimes with tears, sometimes with a faint smile as he recalled old memories. When she finally stood to leave, he reached out and lightly touched her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. "No one has stayed like this in a very long time." Over the next week, Emily found herself stopping by room 312 even when it wasn't technically her patient. She would bring him tea, sometimes a crossword puzzle, sometimes just her company. But the hospital wasn't a place to linger forever. Mr. Whitmore was discharged soon after. She assumed that would be the end of it. Until a letter arrived. It was hand-delivered to the hospital's front desk with her name written in careful script. Inside was a note from Mr. Whitmore. He thanked her for the kindness she had shown when no one else saw the man, only the illness. Enclosed was an invitation to lunch at his home. She hesitated. Nurses weren't supposed to cross certain professional boundaries, but something about his sincerity pushed her to accept. His home was not just a home, it was an estate, the kind you saw in glossy magazines. Tall gates, a sweeping driveway, gardens manicured to perfection. Emily was stunned. Inside, the house was filled with photographs, black and white wedding portraits, snapshots of travels around the world, candid moments of a life deeply lived. "I suppose I should explain," he said with a faint smile when he saw her expression. "Margaret and I built a company together from nothing. The money means little now. What matters is people. Connection. Which I had forgotten until you reminded me." They talked for hours again that afternoon, and this time it was not about illness but about dreams, books, the absurdity of modern life. He told her he wanted to create something in Margaret's honor, a foundation for hospice care and bereavement support. And he wanted her help. Emily's first instinct was to refuse. She was a nurse, not a philanthropist. But then she remembered those first moments in room 312, the quiet desperation, the loneliness in his eyes. If kindness could ripple out from one night's conversation, what could it do with real resources behind it? The months that followed were a whirlwind. Together, they set up the Margaret Whitmore Foundation. Emily balanced her nursing shifts with helping establish programs that trained volunteers to sit with patients who had no family, to simply be there. Word spread. Donations poured in. Lives were touched, not by grand gestures, but by presence, by listening, by seeing the person, not just the diagnosis. There were challenges. Some days the work felt too heavy, stories of loss piling up, moments of helplessness. There were also people who doubted her, questioning why a young nurse was suddenly involved in charitable leadership. But each time she thought about giving up, she remembered the night she almost walked past room 312. Years later, as Emily stood on the stage at the Foundation's annual gala, she looked over at Mr. Whitmore, now healthier, brighter, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for him. "All of this," she said into the microphone, "started because one night, I chose to stay a little longer. Not because I knew who he was, not because I expected anything, but because someone needed company in the dark." We never know how much difference that one choice can make. The applause filled the room, but what Emily felt most was gratitude. Not just for the foundation, or the people they helped, but for the reminder that sometimes, the smallest acts can open the widest doors. And somewhere deep inside, she knew Margaret would have approved.